All right, you're ready to get started.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Bates, President and CEO of the Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and we are really happy that you could join us today with coffee and conversation. In a little bit, we'll be hearing from Charla Hale, who is the Director of Racial Justice at the YWCA. And if you are anywhere around Hamilton, it's hard not to run into Charla because she's everywhere. So you'll appreciate her enthusiasm and passion when she speaks, I am sure. So with that being said, you know who I am. I'm going to give you a little bit of protocol here. We are on Zoom, so you can ask questions of the speaker on Zoom, either chat or just raise your hand. If you are on Facebook Live, type your questions in and Laura will repeat them to Charla so they can be answered. So you know who I am. We're going to find out who all of you are. So on my screen, Chris, you are next. So do you want to introduce yourself? And since we have a couple new people, introduce yourself and who you represent.
I am Chris Cannell. I am the coordinator of community outreach for the Hamilton City Schools.
Thank you. Nicole?
I'm Nicole Sacker. I'm a recruitment specialist for accuracy not language services or interpretation service.
Thank you. Kelly?
I'm Kelly Kraut, the director for Butler Soil and Water Conservation District.
Becky?
I'm Becky Ailing. I am the interim executive director for the Butler Claremont Warren Workforce Investment Board.
Did I miss anyone? Okay, I don't think so. Oh, Laura, I'm sorry. Introduce yourself, Laura.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Merrill with the Greater Hamilton Chamber.
Okay, so we're going to get started. So Charla, I've already given a little bit about your introduction. So we are all here to hear what you have to say. Charla, you're on.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. As mentioned, my name is Charla Hale, and I'm the Director of Racial Justice at the YWCA Hamilton. And so today I just want to share a little with you about the YWCA Hamilton, and particularly our racial justice program, and how we can support businesses in the area, as well as all of our really for-profit and nonprofit partners in the community. So first and foremost, the mission of the YWCA Hamilton is dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. So I like to tell everyone that my job gets to be the first part of that mission, the eliminating racism piece. And so many of you know about our usual programs, but we also have really three central components to the work we do at the YWCA. We are trauma-informed, person-centered, and we truly value equity in all the work that we do. And those four programs, depends on what audience I'm in, depends on what people know us for. And so we have our domestic violence shelter, which is one of the only shelters available in Butler County. We have our Goodman Place permanent supportive housing for individuals who are chronically homeless or have a mental health condition. And then we have our youth empowerment programs, both for young men and young women, in order to help uplift them and reduce interpartmental violence long term. And then we have the racial justice program, which you're going to hear a lot more about today. And so the exciting part about this is the racial justice program. Racial justice has been a component of the work of the YWCA, both nationally and within Hamilton since about the 1940s. Eliminating racism became part of the mission then, and it became the first imperative. And so the reality was all the women leaders came together and said, we can't really empower women if we cannot empower all women equally. So because women of color are oppressed and disenfranchised, we have to first eliminate racism in order to then do the full-time awesome work that is empowerment. And so they came together, and the first imperative initiative became part of what started the eliminating racism piece of our mission. And so the work has always been going on. We've been at the table when it comes to racial justice for a very long time. However, the resources to actually have a full-time position didn't really manifest until 2020, with the YWCA Hamilton receiving an awesome gift from the Mackenzie Scott Foundation. And so that gift is why I'm here in front of you all today. And so I'm really excited to be a great steward of that gift. And what that has resulted in is some actual tangible program priority areas and program goals for us in our racial justice program. And so I like to break it up in 3 sections. And I truly think and believe, and we at the YWCA believe, that these 3 areas, if we can make progress in racial justice, we can truly support the whole community as well as the whole person, and helping everyone in our communities achieve that full realized humanity and livelihood. And so the 3 areas are going to be health, education, and community and civic engagement. And so when it comes to health, I love talking about this with our health partners. This program priority area is really going to be around how can we support and reduce disparities in healthcare across populations. Because one notable issue that we're currently looking at right now is infant and maternal mortality and minority mental health. And what we see right now is that women of color, their babies maybe die in childbirth 2 to 3 times higher the rate than white babies. And so how do we partner with healthcare? How do we partner with doctors? How do we partner with insurance companies? How do we partner with the community to increase the chances of higher advocacy for communities of color? How do you go into the doctor's office and advocate for yourself? How does a doctor's office be more inclusive and more equitable in their services they're providing for communities of color? And then how do we respond when new disparities become apparent? Because we know that these are not the only disparities we're seeing in healthcare, and similar trends are showing up in mental health as well. And that has a lot to do with stigma within communities. So how do we have those conversations across population? The next priority area is going to be education. So we understand that education is one of those social determinants of health. If young people get a quality education, that's going to set them on a track to success later in life. And one things that we're really seeing is disparities in student discipline. So I think many of us have maybe heard about the school to prison pipeline. That illustrates that students of color over time, depending on their community, once they've been identified as maybe a problem child, or they enter the discipline cycle within a school, over time, they consistently will end up in trouble. So much so that eventually leads to actual incarceration within a county or city incarceration system and the criminal justice system as a whole. And so how do we reduce those disciplinary actions in the school building so that we can reduce that return or that even entrance in to the actual criminal justice system outside of the education space? And then working with districts to just increase some restorative justice policies and practices, as well as training and equity in education. So making sure that we're supporting educators of color, that we're helping schools do a policy assessment, because sometimes policies were written but not really thinking about implementation and how that actually affects students of all identities and nationalities and identities. And then postgraduate readiness and staff retention. So how do we keep the awesome young people here that want to be educators? Because I think that's one of the great gifts Hamilton has and Ohio has, is we make great teachers, but nationally it's showing that we don't keep our great teachers. So I know that is a really big driver for a lot of community, a lot of businesses, is staff retention, as well as just talent retention. So how do we keep those young people here and engaged in the community? Which leads into our last, but certainly not least area. And part of the reason I love being in rooms like this is our community and civic engagement priority. And so that's going to look like diversity in just community. So whether that's political involvement, civic involvement, engaging with community partners and organizations like the Chamber. And how do we provide education and training to those partners? And then how do we support minority business development? Because we know that economic development, feeling safe and active in your community, are also going to keep you in community, as well as, again, increase those social determinants of health long term. And so for us, we like to say, I'm excited to say, in this capacity, we're able to provide free training and development for all of our community partners in Butler County, especially in Hamilton, because that's where we are, because we want to see this work happen. And so if that means you're trying to figure out how does this fit in our organization, we want to train our staff, our leadership team. Can you look at our policies, our practices? How do our clients see us? How do those we serve see us and view us? Do they view us as an equitable organization that is racially just? We can help you go through that process, and it is going to be custom to you. There's no one magic wand that's going to fix every organization the same way, because we all struggle with this in different ways and we all want to change in different ways. So truly being able to offer something custom and unique to each organization or community is really our goal. And then ongoing areas, that these are things that are always happening, that I'm around doing in and out of meetings, as Dan said, where you probably see me somewhere. And so we're constantly engaging with law enforcement. How do we make sure that we support them and they support us, and that that relationship is not one that is contentious, but one that is actually cohesive and supporting our communities as a whole, so that all of us feel safe and protected. Doing consistent staff and board education internally, always making sure that the YWCA Hamilton is a model for this work, and not just saying, I'm not just out saying everyone should do it and we haven't tried it ourselves. And then making sure we're constantly doing legislative advocacy. So I was just in Columbus with our other associations of YWCAs across the state, and we're all coming with one voice, advocating for change in these specific areas. And then policy analysis, whether that's locally, whether that's internally for certain organizations. And then last but not least, our Greater Hamilton Coalition Against Hate, which is an initiative that started before I even got here. So as a result of the murder of George Floyd in 2020, several community partners came together and said, we need to be doing something. We don't know fully what that something is, but we need to be a voice. There needs to be a voice in this community that's speaking out against hate and violence. And also in light of the fact that the in 2020 would have been the first Hamilton Pride event. Obviously the pandemic pushed that out. They were also receiving, that community was also receiving threats of violence and not necessarily feeling safe. And so how do we create a community of leaders and stakeholders who are willing to, one, speak out when those instances of violence and hate show up in our community, as well as then refer to resources for survivors of those incidents of hate, and then provide education around the community of how do we respond and prevent instances of hate in the future. So I'm really excited for that. That group has finally coalesced, and we're going to be meeting this month. So I'm really excited. And Dan is on the Coalition Against Hate. So shout out to Dan thank you for being part of this group, because I think it's going to be a really awesome community initiative. And then I would be remiss if I didn't also announce one of my favorite initiatives that we do. So if you have a phone, real quickly, you can always screenshot, or you can take and grab a photo of this. This is our QR code to register for our annual Stand Against Racism Challenge. And the Stand Against Racism Challenge, it started April 4th and it goes until May 2nd. And it is 4 weeks, 21 days of intentional practice. And so the goal is every day you check into the challenge and you learn something about racial justice. So ideally it's all virtual. So this year we have an app and an online platform, so you can do it on your phone. And it's as easy as when you log in every day, you read what your leisure is, what your availability is. So I think today the total amount of articles would be 15 minutes. If you read every single article on the platform today for today's content and today's topic, it would take you 15 minutes. Or you can take 5, because that's all you have. You read one article, get a little bit more insight into that issue. And so the goal here is that we just develop more effective social justice habits, and then we get more content and knowledge around issues of race, power, and privilege, and then how we can be leaders and expand our knowledge base enough to impact our own communities at home. And so in that, to bring it all home, every Thursday here in Hamilton, the YWCA will be hosting community conversations via Zoom on Thursdays at 6 to 7. So if you are a part of the challenge, you'll get a Zoom link and you'll be able to come just talk about it. Let's debrief. Let's process maybe the things that were challenging. Let's process what this looks like here at home. And so there's 4 topics each week. This week is currently living wage, which I think is a really interesting topic because I hadn't spent as much time reading about it. But the past few days, I've really learned a lot about how that impacts communities and different communities differently. And so now I will give it plenty of time for questions, discussion. I am a wealth of knowledge, way more than my PowerPoint says. And so I thank you all for listening to me, and I'll put my contact information up if you want to grab it. And if not, I will also throw it in the chat.
Okay, I'll ask one. Charla, have you noticed any success and change, and if so, what's the biggest area that you have seen the change since you've started?
I can't see. I guess this will be very much anecdotal change. Thank you, Chris, for that question. I I would say since I've been able to be out in the community and have conversations, the biggest change I've noticed is, I think, a ease. There's less anxiety about having the conversation, and more individuals and businesses, community leaders are willing to say, yeah, Charla, come to our coffee and conversations, or hey, come to our leadership team meeting. So I think that anxiety that may have been in the community a year ago, 2 years ago, doesn't seem to be as apparent. It feels like a lot more people are willing and excited to actually have the conversations about racial justice and equity.
So Charla, you mentioned today it was around workforce and pay. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? So
Absolutely.
that people could understand.
So yeah, this week's topic is living wage. And so the reality here is just discussing and a lot of data and really articles, podcasts, opinions, perspectives on what is living wage. So I think oftentimes we don't know. So one of the first things, articles and tools that was shared with everyone on the challenge was the living wage calculator. And so it determined, I took a chance. I was like, let me look up what ours is in Butler County. The living wage in Butler County at this point would be, I think, $13 and some change. It's about $1 cheaper than Hamilton counties. And so that living wage ideally is what would be, they do the math for you, it's an algorithm that assesses how much it would cost to live in our county, and then what the average costs of living are. So whether that's the average utility bill, the average cost for childcare, and they rank it based off of how many children, how many partners or adults living in the home. And so for a single person, I believe in Butler County, I think it was around $30,000 to $40,000 was the range for what someone should be making a year to be able to have a livable wage in Butler County. And so, but also understanding that there are disparities based off population, based off field. So I think another article I read today was talking about how in communities of color, depending on what the field of work is, that living wage is harder to attain. Or sometimes you have individuals doing 2 or 3 jobs in order to gain that same living wage, versus what is it like for individuals who can just work 40 hours a week and make that, versus individuals that have to work maybe 60 hours a week to make that same amount of wage, and what that causes and the trickle-down effects of that. And another interesting article, one of the articles I think yesterday also talked about individuals with disabilities, and how if you don't have parent caregivers, if you don't have a family network, you're solely dependent on your ability to earn a living wage, and then whatever potential aid you receive or support you might receive. And if those don't offset, then automatically you're seeing a trend of poverty in certain communities based off their identities and their access and ability to get work that pays a living wage. So a lot of the articles, I mean, there's a point to the articles. It's not always just perspective. The emphasis is, what does it look like for us to, as a country, as a community, to ensure that all individuals make a living wage working maybe one job instead of multiple, or working, if it's a 40-hour work week, how do we make sure that everyone, if they work their 40 hours, they're making a livable wage? And so another interesting thing I noted in one of the articles today, it said that the minimum wage, fixed minimum wage, I think I hope it was in 1940. I will look it up and probably type it in the chat before, but it hasn't fixed for inflation. So our minimum wage has not actually increased with time at the same rate it should have. So if it would increase at the same rate of what it was, probably, I think it's about 50 years ago, it would be closer to $11, which we're getting there. But right now, in a lot of communities, it's still $7.50. And so understanding that even over time, we haven't raised wages with inflation across the board, whether that's in housing, utilities, food, everything seems to be more expensive nowadays. I know I see it, and I'm sure other communities see it as well.
So Charla, I'm going to probably ask a very unpopular question. And I've been taking the challenge, and I've read all the articles on minimum wage and everything yesterday. And Becky, this is probably one for you too. What is the crossroads of these issues? Minimum wage, entry-level jobs that are not really meant to support, a family. Then you have the inflation of what people are willing to pay. And I'm really talking about industries that are, the service industry and that type of thing. And employers that do want to pay more for their employees will just hire fewer employees. Because rather than to have, 2 people and they're paying them, $10 an hour or $9.50 or whatever, they will opt to have one at 15 and just try to find somebody who's a real worker bee. So are there studies being done on, like fast food and stuff like that, was never really intended, unless you move up to the management level, was never really intended to be somebody's primary job? And I know the barriers and challenges and all that kind of stuff to, kind of get to the next level and everything, but could you just kind of speak to that? Because that's the pushback you get from employers when they're saying, well, I just can't pay these wages. And then, trying to get people into more better paying jobs, even if it's manufacturing entry level and that type of thing, which, obviously pays higher.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely an unpopular question. I think it's a very hard balance, because you have, and I think that's even some of the content today illustrated, that for employers, how do I still have a balance sheet. I still have profit and loss. I still have to make sure that I'm being able to pay the wages I want to pay, keep my store stocked, do the actual business. And if that doesn't balance out in wages, what are the long-term effects? So one of the articles, I think today, and I know I've seen some of the content for later this week, talks about how in a lot of industries, the trends are showing that higher wages do and create higher productivity, because you have employees that are more loyal to the company, employees that are going to be more committed and consistent in showing up on time, potentially staying later if they need to, taking more shifts or taking extra shifts. So that increase in wage long-term benefits the company, because I can even say from internally at the YWCA, we're all dealing and trying to navigate with what appears to be a labor shortage. But the reality is the cost of consistently training staff, you're honestly spending it. You're spending the same money you might would have been, in some industries, more money you're spending on the constant training and turnover than you would if you would just up wages. Because the reality is, after you pay for so many background checks that don't turn into a position, or after you pay for so many weeks worth of training that doesn't turn into an actual committed staff on your team, you might be able to reassess and say, well, if we up actual wages $2 or $3, or even $4 in some cases, depending on how low your wages are, you're still going to save money in the long run. And Becky, if you have anything to add, I'm sure this is definitely your wheelhouse.
Well, I was just at a conference last week, so and there was a study done. 2 different areas did the studies, and where you think that the normalcy is on what the issues are, just blew us away from what they're finding out from the surveys. One of the biggest issues is the lack of workforce, period.
Yep.
People used to have 2.5 or 2 kids each. People are often not even to have kids. So therefore that cuts down on the workforce as we're going forward, right? And then when you're thinking about childcare or the barriers that people have, I was a stay-at-home mom until my kids went to school. Where do we go to look for jobs, or how do we look for a job once I'm no longer a stay-at-home mom? So, as a workforce development board, that's what we look at. That's what we try to, hey, think outside the box. Let's go to kindergarten registrations. Maybe that's where we go, thinking about different areas. And I think with you, Charlotte, it's the same thing. We got to think outside of the box. We've been too comfortable as businesses. We've been too comfortable as employees as to where we're at. And I think COVID has proved to us that as an employer, you need to think outside the box. One of the barriers is childcare and transportation. So how do we knock those down? And one of those is, let's talk to the local YMCA. Let's talk to the local childcare places and areas to see if we can't put childcare inside of our business or flex hours easier. I think that would help tremendously no matter where you're at, you know. I found it interesting also that you said in Hamilton County, the livable wage was, but in Butler County, but in Hamilton County, it was different. So I service 3 counties, Butler, Claremont, Warren. Each area has a different livable wage. And we need to, but yet I'm supposed to work as one piece of area. And we need to, like Southwestern Ohio, the whole area should come up to one living wage, because I have people that go from Claremont County to Hamilton County to work, or vice versa, or into Butler County. And it just, the living wage needs to be addressed, whether it is by flexibility, giving people the option to work from home, the remote option. That helps great deal. If you couldn't afford, you're a business that can't necessarily afford to pay that higher wage, think outside the box of letting the people stay home to work. You'll be surprised at the productivity. That was another thing, because if they're staying home, they're not working, they're not being productive. The productivity went up because people were able to flex their schedule and they liked the fact that they was able to flex their schedule. They could take the kid to the dentist if they needed to take the kid to the dentist, and then work a couple hours extra in the evening. Or once the kids went to bed, everything was a lot quieter and they was able to sit down and concentrate. Whereas at the office, maybe people's in and out of the office, you still can't concentrate there sometimes. So taking that flexibility and having businesses be able to really sit down and study what is causing their lack of pool. And then the resources. I'm going to plug my OMJs. They have the resources, but people don't tend to think of them. They think of Indeed. They think of all these other areas. Being able to go there to and help with on-the-job training. And we talk about, the lower income or something. Yes, that's exactly what the OMJs are there to help for, but they're also there to help people. COVID showed us, CEOs get laid off. Everybody gets laid off. We're here for everybody to help.
Thank you so much, Becky. Because it's the intersection of our work, I really want to emphasize that childcare piece, because that's been a problem specifically for women that's consistently kept women at a reduced wage. Because even after you think about equal pay as a whole, then the cost of childcare, so much so that this was not in the challenge, but I read an article the other day that several women were reporting just not going back to work. Since the pandemic, they just said, I'll be a stay-at-home mom because it's actually cheaper to just take my wage out of the family and let the husband work full-time, let whatever partner work full-time all the time, and we'll live off that, then pay for childcare. Because you have moms that their full salary is childcare at that point, because it's costing, $25,000, $30,000 a year to keep a child in childcare. And that's just a child, let alone if you had more than one. So it's just more cost effective to say, you know what, I'll stay home, watch the kids, and then we can actually have more tangible income in the household because we're just spending my salary on childcare anyway.
Therefore, you only have one car. Therefore, you only have, gas at $5, $4 or $5 a gallon. All of that comes into play. Like I said, I was a stay-at-home mom because by the time I had 2 kids. By the time I would pay childcare, we maybe made $100 a month over top of it. You know, it wasn't worth it. You know, that wouldn't have paid for my gas. That wouldn't have paid for, you know, payments on a car or whatever to get me back and forth to work. So the thought has to really, we need to really just work with our partners and work with our businesses on those thoughts. So if you flex, and I realize manufacturing is like very hard to flex on, but there's other businesses out there, administrative, where you can flex. You can really allow them to be noon to 8 instead of, you know, 9 to 5. And that allows the husband maybe, or the partner or whatever, to have a different shift. And that can really, childcare then becomes alleviated to a certain point.
If I can just say something, because I think it gets brought up a lot, the idea that a lot of these jobs are only meant to be temporary jobs, which might have been true in the 1950s, but like now your average fast food worker is like 29 years old. And you can say, well, why aren't they getting other jobs? But back in the 1950s, you know, most of our grandparents and things like that, they worked in manufacturing, and those jobs don't exist in the United States anymore. So these people still need to earn a living. And you know, when you're saying like $13 an hour, that's got to be for a single person, right? Not somebody who's trying to pay for childcare, because like I make $19 an hour and I stress thinking about, if I have a child, how the heck would I pay for childcare? And I'm, you know, doing fine on my own, but that's a real situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's just, you said it all. I think that, and I think it's the I think to Becky's point, working with even working as an organization, getting creative of what actually are the requirements for employment in some positions, because I think oftentimes you see that, okay, can a high school diploma be enough? And if so, does your job truly do on the job training? Or are you saying you want a college diploma just because, or is there actual legitimate reason and training necessary, because we understand the barriers, both economic, community-based, culture-based, that limit people getting a degree of any, whether that's associates, whether that's a bachelor's, of any standard. So oftentimes, and then it's to that flexibility point, the different commitment, the commitment I have to a fast food job is completely different than what I might have to have for an admin position at a company or an office job. I can work those creative hours if I need to at a fast food job, because my kids are at school these times, and I can come back and work overnight. So thinking about that flexibility of the workforce as a whole, and how fluid it is to serve the population that actually needs livable work and livable wages to work on.
And I think the pandemic's taught us patience. How many of you guys have gone to a restaurant and, you know, you used to go in, you used to get seated, you used to get your food and you're back out in 45 minutes. And now it's an hour, hour and a half if you go to a restaurant to eat, you know, because you say, well, all these, look at all these waitresses over here, you know, or waiters over here. Why is it taking so long? Well, because we're short staffed in the kitchen where you didn't see it, you know, or the backfill of cleaning the dishes, or just different areas. And we need to, and I think we're learning this, to be more patient and be more accepting of different thoughts, outside the box. I'll say that, you'll hear me say that so many times when you're talking to me, you know, hit that gray area. Let's look for the gray areas that we can get into to help get people jobs, get people on the higher road to employment and stuff. So yeah, I'm with you, Charla.
I mean, you know, there's no simple solution to any of this. And then when you look at, you know, 85% of the people employed in the United States are employed in small business. Small business is a relative term. You know, small business can be 100 employees. To me, that's not really small business. And if you look at the real numbers, you know, most people are employed by entities that have 50 or fewer employees. So, you know, I'm just saying, if we could look at maybe solutions by size and industry. Because for instance, manufacturer or food service or hospitality, there is no option to work from home. There is an option for flexible schedules. So, how do they do that? I know ThyssenKrupp has filled some positions with the Work Plus program. Instead of hiring one full-time person, they hire 2 part-timers to fill that job, which is being creative. I think employers have been, for the most part, very creative. And Becky, what you say is true, because that's what we heard, is the concern from people working from home is that productivity would take a hit. It really went up. For some employees, it went down, and some of those employees are no longer employed. But for good employees, they found that their productivity actually went up. It's just a challenge, because to say to an employer who has 10 employees, can you provide childcare? Well, probably not. So maybe there needs to be looking at, are there groups of employers that are clustered within close proximity that could pool their efforts and do something? And that's kind of things, because, employers are struggling. And, our current administration in many ways seems to think that, all corporations and businesses are raking in the cash. And, they're in worse shape now than they were during COVID and post-COVID, because they actually had very good profits the past couple of years. They're struggling now because, inflation, and you talk about waiting at a restaurant. What happens is not everyone waits. So, some people say, it's going to be an hour and a half, I'll go somewhere else. And we even see that in Hamilton. We see them leaving and walking down the street looking for something else. Now, on the other hand, that helps retail, because while they're looking, they window shop, and they, so it's really complicated. That's all I'm saying. And it's, there's not one solution. And I do agree with you that if an employee is not happy with an employer, or, that employer is not willing to work with that employee at all, then they should leave and find a better job, and there are a lot of jobs out there even still. Problem is, when the statistics show that unemployment is down, well, that's just people receiving unemployment. That doesn't mean everybody's back to work. So there are still employers that are desperate for employees, but honestly, they quit looking. And that's another challenge. So I don't mean to be negative. It sounds like I'm being negative. I'm really not. I'm just, we're all in this together, and none of the solutions can be a broad swipe. So there's so many different issues that impact employees and employers today, because we're in a place we've never been before, where, there's lots of jobs, but not a lot of people to fill them. We're trying to raise the minimum wage, and I'm not saying I'm against that, but there are ramifications, because that will continue to increase inflation. And the problem with inflation is, who gets hurt the worst are the very population we're talking about. So if somebody, is making $13 an hour and they get up to $15 an hour, it's like, that sounds like a lot. That's going to be completely eaten up by inflation. And then the bigger problem, is that thing they call the benefit cliff. And, I just heard a story recently, mother with a couple children, she's working, she's being paid under the table, which is illegal, looking for a job, an employer that will pay her under the table, because if she reports that income, she loses her food stamps and childcare assistance and all of that. And she's not going to make enough with that job to make up for that. She would have to be making, according to the challenge I saw yesterday, she'd have to be making like $30 an hour to make up for that. And she's not going to go from 12 to 30. She might go to 12 to 18, which makes her further in the hole. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I don't know what the answer is, but it's not a simple solution. And I think the small employers, where most people are employed, are the least able to make some of these shifts, because like I said, they'll just hire fewer people and make them work harder.
Absolutely.
And Dan, I don't think you're bringing up negative issues. I think you're bringing up real issues that are out there. It's out there for employees and out there for employers. These are areas that have to be tapped into, that have to be thought through. We can't just put our head in the sand on that issue so that we can solve this issue, that we have to solve try to work on all the issues. I don't think we're going to solve them all. If anybody's got that magic wand, let me know.
So
It'll
Becky,
make my job a lot easier.
has there been any, because the benefit cliff really is a huge issue.
Mhm.
And I know our congressman has talked about that for years. Has there been any conversations about, allowing people to receive all of their benefits for a certain period of time once they, take a new job or something, instead of just getting cut off, because if somebody could have 6, 9 months, maybe even a year to continue receiving benefits, even though they got that new job that pays them $40,000 a year after being on assistance for, the last couple of years. That's the problem, because it's exactly what you were saying when women choose not to work because it doesn't pay, it's not worth it. And I have friends who have done that, say, well, one of us is not going to work because we can't make enough to pay for childcare and a second car. It doesn't make sense, The same thing with the benefit cliff, because they get cut off immediately. As soon as they start receiving those larger checks, they're cut off. And now here they are in a new job, which is stressful. They have a great opportunity, which can pull them out of poverty forever, and they can't afford to do it.
Mhm. Which, Dan, I think that also ties into that earlier point of that who is that fast food worker? Who is that service line worker?
Right.
It often makes more sense to just work in fast food for 40 hours a week because it helps me keep my benefits. And so keep money on the table. But I think there is some conversation at the legislative level around some level of walking down benefits. Another big component, I think, because it's consistently coming up and the pandemic shed a lot of light on it, is universal child care or some level of voucher. So we understand the child tax credit. Families were doing really well under it and being able to write off a significant portion of the your child care costs. Is it a perfect fix yet? No, because it depends on how much you make. It depends on, it's only certain to a certain degree of write-off you can have per person in the family, which is still barely half of the total cost of childcare per year. So there's conversation. I think there's movement. I personally think something like a universal child care policy or something that really reduces the price of childcare for certain families would radically shift who you see in the workforce and create a lot more consistency in our workforce and our labor force. Because now you have a bunch of parents that are able to work potentially a traditional 9 to 5 or even other hours more consistently because they have trusted, affordable childcare. So there are conversations in a lot of different spheres, both I think state and federal level around, and we advocate for it. I mean, that's one of our biggest components of advocacy as an organization that empowers women is we need to make sure that childcare is affordable because we know that's a barrier to women being able to have full realized lives and be in the workforce and earn truly a livable and profitable wage. So that is definitely something in the conversation. Another thing I think in this conversation, because we talk about diversity, one piece that we always forget is lost from the workforce now are retirees. Because I remember my time at McDonald's, like the day shift, that early morning to 2 o'clock, those usually are retirees that are supplementing their disability or social security income. So although who was serving you at lunchtime, it wasn't a 29-year-old. It might have not been a high schooler. It was a senior citizen more often than not. And because of COVID, I mean, we understand the loss of life as well as just the fear now, because you have seniors that are saying, well, I'm at risk. I'm the risk population. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go home and figure it out. And so that's a complete vacuum that hasn't really been filled because you don't have seniors returning or retirees returning to the workforce because of that health and safety concern. Because I can tell you right now, that's missing. I know it's missing because I've worked in it. I've worked in it before when I was in high school. So that's another population that is how do we re-earn their trust to potentially come back into the workforce, even if it is just to find like a hobby. Because I know that was some retirees of, I've been working for 25, 30 years, 40 years somewhere. I'm not going to just sit at home. So let me work a couple hours at McDonald's and then go home. This is my little extra money, but it was a member of the workforce. It made a shift covered. So that's another population I think we should figure out, how do we create safety for them?
And you do touch on a big point that, you know, we always knew the baby boomers, the day was coming when baby boomers were going to retire, and it was going to take a mass amount out of the workforce, right?
Yep.
Well, COVID expedited it, because they was probably, you know, phasing in and out, you know, before they just like, nope, done. You know, a lot of them were tradespeople. You know, our trades are hurting because schools push so hard to put somebody into college. I'll give you an example. My 6-year-old granddaughter come to me the other day and said, "Ma, you know, girls go to college to get knowledge." I'm like, "Oh, really? What do boys do?" "Well, they go to school to get knowledge too, or college to get knowledge too." And I'm like, "Oh, well, what if you don't go to college? What happens?" Well, she thought about it for a minute. She goes, "I guess you don't get knowledge." And that just like blew me away. It enlightened me so much that, you know, the state and the federal government has made it so hard for schools that they have to teach a certain way to hit their marks, to hit their criteria, that the kids are taking away that these trade jobs that they could get, not have college debt, and pay a pretty good wage, are lower class jobs to take because they need to go to college to do it. Not all kids are college bound. You've got your college bound kids, and by all means, I believe they need to go to college. I don't want no trade person working on me as a doctor. I want a doctor working on me as a doctor. But it's that same concept that, you know, there's different jobs out there for everybody. And but we just got to figure out how to make sure, to your point, Charla, that they were making a living wage, that everybody is being treated equal to go into this, that this is the way that it needs. The mentality has to change. We have to be there.
You know, Charlie, trying to address those students that are not college bound, so that they start building their resume from an early age. What I've been doing is, when I go around to these local businesses, I'm trying to find, there are many places that will start hiring at 14. And I'm getting a groundswell of students that really disproportionately, the 14, 15, and 16-year-olds, they're chomping at the bit to work. It's the older ones that I'm trying to get to understand, hey, utilize me. You know, I'm trying to place you in here and I will help you. If you're waiting till you graduate, you're kind of on your own. You know, so I'm trying to reach these kids at the youngest age possible, and then encourage them to that work, school just becomes second nature. I go to work and I go to school, and, you know, and by the time they're seniors, or by the time that they're graduating, they will have had a full gamut of life experience, work experience, you know, under their belt, because they've been working since they were 9th grade. And then I'm trying to educate the local companies to really take a look at their job descriptions, because everything is always just boom, high school diploma required. And, you know, I've mentioned to them before, to take food trays to a patient's hospital room doesn't require a high school diploma. You know, but dropping that and taking a chance on a young kid who's impressionable might, you know, get that person to think, yeah, you know, I'd like to work in the healthcare setting. Never thought about it before. So that's a challenge of just getting, you know, here you are, company owner, desperate for employees, but you're not bending and changing to accommodate that. So that's a hurdle that I'm working on.
And Chris, you make a good point, because by the time they're 18 or 19, 17, 18, graduating, they either know or don't know what they want. But the ones that don't know haven't had any life experiences like you're talking about, to kind of, okay, I waited, I took trays to hospital. Healthcare is not for me. Let me try it different. And giving them the different life experiences starting at a younger age to get them up to when they do come to, you know, their senior year, they have a little bit better ideal as to where they want to go. Because right now, that was in that study too, we should be starting at least at 6th grade, working these kids up, letting them see the different, even if it's bringing different employers to the school so they can see different things. A firefighter, you know, at 6th grade, you're thinking, okay, let's bring in a firefighter, let's bring in a policeman, let's bring in, you know, a truck driver, let's bring in different people.
Yes.
And let them see that there's different things out there. And
Because
then go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, because if they've been raised, that a lot of their parents have not been exposed to all the companies that are in this area. So they only know what their parents don't know.
That's right.
You know, and so, you know, they grow up with the stereotype, oh, there's nothing around here, I have to move, you know, to find employment. Whereas if they can get a taste at an early impressionable age, and it opens their eyes to like, wow, I didn't realize all this thing was here. You know, I'm working to get videos from all the local companies, as many local companies as I can possibly find, keep adding these videos. And there's like 5 flat screen TVs in the high school cafeteria. And I want to roll nothing but just all these companies' videos, so that subliminally kids sitting in the cafeteria will get over, oh, that's what Matandi Steel looks like. And oh, I heard of this company, and then they actually can see what goes on inside, and just trying to, like I said, offer students the opportunity to, you know, for my help, Dan's help, we've partnered with the city, so that there's many folks that will go to bat and give mock interviews and everything, and trying to get these kids the mindset of work and exposure to what's out there.
Chris, I just had a thought, and it's always easier for me to tell somebody else what they should be doing. So did you ever think of, and I know you're focused on, finding experiences and part-time jobs and full-time jobs and potential careers for these kids, but I just thought of something. When I'm looking at the screen here, there isn't a person on here that has a job that a kid knows exists. We talk about the opportunities, and it's, fireman, policeman, doctor, lawyer, da 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 da. None of us are any of those. We're probably, I know I am, I'm very passionate and happy about what I do, and, there are so many job opportunities out there that are excellent careers that there's no awareness of. So I'm wondering if we could mix in with some of those, like very quick snippets, 15-second interviews of obscure positions that people have that they love. It's kind of educate kids. I mean, a chamber president. Did I ever think I'd be a chamber president? No. Even when I was 40 years old, I didn't think I was going to be a chamber president, So, come on, Charla, who thought that there would be a job for, to fight racism? Really? These are things that, and I'm not saying they're not great opportunities. I'm just saying these aren't even on the kids' radar, because you're right, Chris, they're not on the parents' radar, and they're certainly not on the school's radar. The guidance counselors and the teachers, they know what they know. They don't know, what all these jobs are that people do and are passionate about and are significant and are making a difference. Becky, I look at your position, like it's probably not something you dreamed about doing when you were graduating from high school, and it's all these positions that actually are making a significant difference, in our communities that kids have no idea exist.
Well, it's funny you say that, Dan, because the comment that keeps getting said, who goes to school or to college or anything to be a workforce development director?
Right.
No one.
Right.
It's something that you become passionate about and you do, you know what I mean? And then to Chris, your point, they don't know, and the parents don't know, because it's that cycle that they're in. They don't know what they don't know. So it's our jobs out here in the community to teach them what they don't know. to get that cycle, to break that cycle, because there's no other way to break that cycle, because it's going to continue. I'm a farmer because my dad was a farmer, and his father was a farmer, and nothing is farmers. My family farms, but it's just, that's the cycle. And they don't think that, well, there's nothing else out there for me, because that's what my family does, is farm. And as old school as that is still very much happening in areas that the family is just not hitting that level yet. How many times do we hear, I'm the first one to go to college out of my family? Great, that's breaking the cycle. I'm the first one to get a trades job out of my family. Great, that broke the cycle. People can start seeing nieces, nephews, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody starts seeing, oh, well, there is a position out there for different people, that we can look at.
Well, have we solved all the problems of the world yet?
Absolutely. Done in this one conversation.
I think this has been really great conversation, but we do have to kind of bring it to a close and wrap it up. Does anybody have any last minute questions? Laura, do we have our next topic for the next coffee and conversation?
Yes, we do. We'll be hearing from Casey Katz from Women Helping Women, and she's going to be discussing the Work Strong program.
Okay, wonderful. And we have Becky scheduled for the future, right?
Yep, she is. So Casey is on April 26th, and Becky we have on May 10th.
Okay, cool. So
Are those both on your website?
Yep.
Yep.
So if you want to register, it's hamilton-ohio.com.
I think both of those presenters are going to stir some great conversation just like today. So anyway, we want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Charla, for being here. And thank you for all who participated in this. And Nicole, I did see your message in the chat box, and I'm sure that's true. A lot of high school students don't even know there is such a thing as a recruiter, what does a recruiter do? So anyway, so thank you all for joining us. Have a great day. And we will see you in a couple of weeks at Coffee and Conversations. Thanks.
Thanks, Charla.
Thank you.